Barry, we actually have Scott Weingart on here. Do you think we should, play the power games and make him wait and stuff?
No way. You crazy?
All right. Sorry. All right. Well, that's it. Welcome to session number 31 of the Podcast Engineering Show. Count it. Yeah. I said count it right over when he was counting it. Oh, well. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is my band. They're in studio. They're rocking right in front of me as I speak. Not really. Actually, they are, and I can fade them as well. See, that's a nice little audio engineering setup I have. Well, you've landed on the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet, as well as select business authors. And each week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop. We get down and dirty. We talk about the gear, the equipment, the workflow. We really talk about the audio engineering side of podcasting. We don't get into marketing. We don't get into downloads. We don't get into, on-air skills, how to host a show, none of that stuff. It's all about the audio engineering. And of course, I have Barry here with me. Barry, you're ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I have a background in audio engineering in the music business. And since I entered podcasting about 4 years ago, I've noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting. And it's, it is what it is. People start podcasting because it's easy, but they don't have any audio engineering background. And that's what this show is here to help with. And of course, my school, the Podcast Engineering School that I'm setting up right now. There'll be a couple courses available soon, and then I'm actually going to have bigger courses where I'm actually going to certify individuals as podcast engineers. So you can go get a job or you could start your own business doing it. And that's what I'm psyched about. Quickly, little announcement. Next April 21st and 22nd, I'm going to be speaking at the podcasting course. And that's going to be in Lexington, Kentucky. So here's the deal. If you are in medical education or you know anyone in medical education, this is an area where podcasting is really catching on. And Rob and the guys over there are putting together this awesome, it's called The Podcasting Course, and it's in April, and it's in Lexington, Kentucky. So check that out. The website is www.thepodcastingcourse.com. So check it out, thepodcastingcourse.com. I'm kind of psyched about that. You're going to be there, Scott, right?
I am. I saw the lineup and I said, I need to join this group.
So my guest today, you heard his voice already. That's Scott Weingart. That's right. He's an MD. He's a medical doctor. See the kind of the quality of guests that we have on this show for you. And he's also an FCCM. Have you ever heard of that? Scott, tell him what that is.
It means I take care of sick people for a living.
Sick people, and the sickest of the sick, right?
Yeah.
The extreme.
You don't want to meet me. That's what I tell anyone who comes across me. And they're like, wow, can I come to your office? No, you never, ever, ever want to see me.
And the reason you're on this show is because you're the host of the EMCrit Podcast. And EMCrit, you're also the editor-in-chief of the website. So first of all, what is EMCrit?
EMCrit is emergency medicine, critical care. It's the intersection of the ICU and emergency departments.
Oh, that's cool. All right, so handy for people who are in need, obviously. And so you have the website, which is all about that, and then you also host a podcast, which talks about that subject as well, right?
Yeah, and the podcast is all that matters, and the website is just there to back up the podcast because I am clearly someone who likes to talk instead of write.
Really? Your website has a lot of stuff on it. It's EMCrit.org. That's the website. EMCRIT.org. So, one of the things I like to do is I like to go to people's websites and sort of see, like, for their podcast show and see how they have it set up. Like, where are the posts, where's the play buttons, and I just like to look at it. So if you're listening to this and you want to check it out, the link to the website is in the description or the post for this episode, which is session. I said episode.
I heard that slip.
Dude, it's been a long time since like session 5 since I've messed up and said episode. Anyway, this is session 31. So go to podcastengineeringschool.com, session 31. So let's get into this, Scott. First of all, how long have you been podcasting?
7 years.
7 years, man. You got me by like 3.5 at least. That's awesome.
It's been a while.
That's cool. So we're going to learn all about your workflow and your equipment, and I really want to get into that. And if you're a return listener to the show, you know that we do the speed round. So let's do the speed round. Is the EMCrit podcast the only show you produce?
I do some other podcasts with friends. It's the main one, but yeah, I do 3 of them now.
Oh, really? Just throw them out real quick. What are they?
edecmo.org, which is putting patients on cardiopulmonary bypass, and then MRAP, which is another emergency medicine show.
Okay. There you go. And I'm sure there's links to that on your website.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so speed round. Let's use the EMCrit podcast. Tell me, basically, when you're ready to record an episode, tell me about your equipment and your workflow. Just give me the overview, and then we'll pick through it as we go.
Sure. So most commonly, I'm going through a Shure 87A into a Sound Devices USB pre, which essentially is just there to amp up that mic and change from digital to audio. I'm going into a PC, recording directly into Audition. Really nothing going on that signal at all. I do it all in post. Monitoring through AKG 240s. And that's really for a single, when I'm just recording myself, that's it. That's the entire signal chain.
Got it. When you're recording yourself. Okay. And then, so you get it into post, then take us through that real quick.
Yeah, so I've gotten to the point where I have the level set up pretty well. It comes in hitting at like -6 dB, and I'll take a look at the audio. And I should say, while I was recording, because I hate editing. I don't know about you, Chris, but editing sucks. And when I first started, for every 20 minutes of audio, it would be like 2 hours slaving away trying to figure out where the ums and ahs are.
Right.
And so I just I couldn't do that anymore. It was just a time suck, and it was miserable because what you like doing is recording. What you hate doing is editing.
Right.
So to get past that, I did some voice work and really tried to get rid of all those stumble points so that I didn't have to go back. And then came to the realization that people don't care that much, that editing down to perfection is probably superfluous and may even hurt your message because no one talks like a robot, even though sometimes when you first started editing, you think that they do, and you get rid of every pause and breath. So I stopped doing that. And then I don't even remember where this tip came from, but someone recommended a dog clicker. Have you ever heard one of these? Well, now you have, right? And what this does is if you put it anywhere near the mic, you get this beautiful, peaking double line because it's the in and the out of that click. And you could look at your audio in a DAW and just immediately pick out your edit points. So now all of a sudden, instead of like having to go through 20 minutes, 30 minutes of audio, I have to go to the 4 points I actually made a click, fix those areas, You just pause after the click and then you re-say whatever you wanted to say. And boom, editing is now like a pleasure.
Wow. That's a great idea. So you see these 2 major spikes in the WAV file.
Absolutely. And since, the rest of the audio is nowhere near 0 dB, it's so obvious where these edit points are. I used to clap, which works well too, but it's really discordant to your flow to have to stop and then clap your hands in front of the mic. So that's one editing tip that made my life a lot better. And then if I had an air conditioner on, instead of using a noise gate, Audition, which is my DAW, it's just, I love the noise reduction in Audition, and I'll just sample a bit of that air conditioning during a pause in the speaking. And if I remember, I'll actually just record silence for 5 or 10 seconds, either at the beginning or the end. But usually, even if I haven't, there's always space to grab some of that noise, sample it, and then use their built-in noise reduction just to take that out. So that would be the first step. I'll do that before anything else is. If there needs any noise reduction to get a clean line in between speaking, I'll do that. Then I have a setup that just comes up as a preset, but you could obviously do this all individually. And so I'll bring up a parametric equalizer, and I'll just run it through a high-pass filter. I'll get rid of everything below like 100 or 90 hertz. Just roll that out, and then I'm going to compress. And I took some mastering lessons with Bruce Williams down in Australia. He had put out 2 wonderful podcasts on audio engineering for podcasts. Sign language was one of them, and building the pod, and these were out like years ago. I'm sure they're still up somewhere, but he stopped doing them. But it taught me everything I know about audio engineering. So I took some individual lessons with him as well. And the way he taught me to do the next step of compression was to really find the fat part of your audio, the part where you're not just getting intermittent peaks above it, but the nice fat part of the audio signal. And for my recordings, that's usually around minus 12 dB. And I'll put in the case of Audition, I'll use a tube model compressor, maybe just get that grunge feel of, just aspire to be a rock and roller. But I don't think it matters. I think any of the compressors in there would be fine. And
yeah.
Yeah, Barry. And I'll just, take that signal down around that fat part 3-to-1 with the compressor and just knock off some of the peaks. And then I'll just hard limit to bring up the actual audio levels. And I'm doing that with, and I'm blanking on the name, Chris, but they actually have an RMS monitor now in Audition. And I'll bring up the hard limiter until I get to the minus 19 for my mono signal.
Right, minus 19 RMS.
Exactly, sir.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because RMS is close to that new LUF standard, but it's not the same. And I actually use RMS still as well, and I really want to get a LUFS meter, or I'm sure there's plugins where
I might be lying because it is a LUFS meter, but I'm pulling it up as we speak so that I could not lie about anything Audition has. Yeah, it's the real thing, and it's beautiful because it means I don't have to leave the program at all. I used to have to go into some other program to actually get that LUFS metering,
right.
But now it's called the Loudness Radar. And it's measuring an LKFS, Chris, which probably makes more sense to you than me. Is that the same as LUFS? I've always thought it was.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's similar.
Yeah, I think it's virtually equivalent, but I'll check on that.
LKFS. And
this is the TC Electronic Loudness Radar built into the stock Adobe Audition.
TC Electronics. They used to make a hardware unit called the TC Finalizer. It was for mastering. It was like, I used it in the late 90s, I think, but it was a little one rack space unit, but it had all these presets for mastering, and it sounded really good. And you could obviously adjust all the parameters, but there were presets as well. And it's funny, when I first got into podcasting, I was like sort of looking for that. I actually searched online for that because I was like, I definitely want to, take whatever podcasts I produce and run it through mastering, because that's an important step, actually, because the mastering is the step that prepares the audio for like when the listener is in a louder place. Like that's why radio does that. They have the hard limiter because when you're in your car and there's all the road noise, if the voices get too low, you can't hear it anymore. So the mastering step is the one that does like the final leveling, which makes it listenable everywhere. So I was looking for this TC Finalizer and I couldn't find it. And then I even asked somebody and they're like, oh, just get a plug-in. Everything's in the box these days. And I was like, yeah, but it's not the same. But in a way, it is the same. Anyhow, 4 years later, I still don't have it. And I don't need it. I actually use a isotope mastering multi-band compressor, which works pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use that in SoundForge.
You hit on one of my pet peeves in the medical podcasting world. Chris,
even before we get to the Blue Yeti?
Yeah. Pushing buttons. It is these podcasts that are just too low, and you just have to like slam the volume setting on your car in order to be able to hear anything. It just drives me nuts.
Right? A lot of it, you know what it is? I've been thinking about this. I was taking a walk last night with my wife, just around the neighborhood. We walk all the time. And I was amazed how many podcasters and podcast producers don't even use EQ very much. And they just, especially if you have a decent mic, it's easy to think that, oh, it sounds good, it's done. Well, it's usually not done, especially the low end. Like you use the high-pass filter to roll off below 100 or 90. I do the same thing because that rumble takes up so much of the energy, and it also makes it a little more muddy, and you don't need it. It's much more clear without it. So I was actually, I'm continually surprised how few people use really EQs in podcasting, because you have to add high end as well. In fact, there's one listener who wrote me an email who was critical of several things I said, which is awesome. If you're critical of anything I say, please write me. I want to hear from you. Let's have a little back and forth, because that person, he's going to be on the show soon, probably, which is going to be awesome. I love it. That's the whole point, is to talk about it. So
absolutely.
He recognized that above like 15 or 17K kilohertz, there's a big roll off. And he thought that I was using a low pass filter, meaning rolling off the high end. And I don't. But guess why the high end is rolled off? Because of these microphones. These microphones don't have a frequency response above that. The microphone itself rolls off.
Yep.
So you're not even catching it to begin with. So that's why, that's not the only reason why, but when you're EQing a voice, you need to roll off the low end, usually, not always, because some people use these earbuds and you need all the low end you can get. But sometimes you got to roll off the low end, and most times you got to boost some sort of either high, mid, or high to get more presence. And that contributes a lot to what you just said, which is if you're in your car or you're somewhere, you just can't hear it. It's not loud enough, and it's not present enough. It's not clear enough and crisp enough.
Absolutely. You're losing the intelligibility of the speech.
Right. So you're on a road podcaster right now.
Right now, just to make a point, because this poor mic has taken abuse, but I still think this is the best USB podcasting mic out there.
I like the way it sounds. I really do. And I can tell you have a pop filter.
Indeed. Though with this one, you could put your lips up to it and you don't really need a pop filter. But I do,
okay,
just to keep my mic distance stable, because I always have my lips nearly touching my pop filter on this one. There's not much of a proximity effect, and it just keeps the levels consistent.
I love that. That is one pet peeve of all recording engineers, especially podcast engineers, who when the person who's talking, they're kind of talking and then they're kind of looking sideways and they keep talking. It's like, dude, can you talk into the mic? Even people with earbuds now, like, I mean, can you get any lazier? But okay, you're lazy, fine. You're using earbuds, and like, in all fairness, it's usually the guests who don't know anything, which is fine. But even with earbuds, besides flapping that mic around and making all noise, they turn their head to the other side like this, and then they start talking, and then it's like, anyway. Do you also have your Rode Podcaster on a shock mount?
I do. I wouldn't do anything with a shock mount at this point. I want to be able to drink water, or more likely, if it's after 4 p.m., beer or wine. And I don't want that coming on to the recording.
Right, yeah, because like I was just telling you that some of my hosts, some of my clients, use the Blue Yeti. They put it on a table, no pop filter, no shock mount, no nothing. And usually they're not even that close to it. And usually they're straying from the mic as well. So, you lose their voice like that. And so I'll say what I have to say about the Blue Yeti, then you can chime in, okay?
All right.
So I think if it's used properly, that is a very good sounding mic. Because it's a condenser. It's very clear and crisp. It's a condenser, which on the negative side of being a condenser, it picks up so much room noise, right? That's what condensers do. So I think it is a very good sounding mic, but you need a shock mount, you need a pop filter, and it helps if the person knows how to speak into a mic. And especially if it's somebody who's using, like, look, the Blue Yeti is versatile. It has 4 pickup patterns, which is awesome because you can have it on Omni. You can put it on a table and have 5 people sitting around a table and record everyone. Of course, we know that doesn't sound very good, but you can do it. Well, it depends what kind of room you're in, actually. And it depends how quiet the people are. If everyone's tapping their foot and clicking a pen and sighing and slamming their drink on the table, it's going to be horrible, obviously. But if people are quiet and you're in a studio space, it could be okay. So look, the Blue Yeti is a versatile mic, but you just have to make sure you don't ruin the sound in these other ways. Like I said, without a shock mount, without a pop filter, and of course having it on the right pickup pattern always helps.
Yeah.
So Scott, tell me about the Blue Yeti.
Okay, so you have to understand why I have this perverse hatred for this microphone. So it's a great mic. I owned it when I started. I bought a whole bunch of mics to see what worked best. And the reason I have a problem with this mic is for some reason, maybe it's the way it looks, maybe it's just that there's been this perpetrating of recommendations. Every single medical podcaster has wound up with this mic. And for most people, it's the wrong one. It is delightful sounding. It is a great mic if, as you say, you're in a sound limited room, a room that actually is made to record audio in, and you don't have kids, and there's no traffic sounds, and you put your finger on it, you actually stick the mic by your face. But the way the mic is designed, it just entrains people to put it on a table and then stay like 8 feet back from it. So you're just getting so much background noise, so much reverb, all this stuff. Now, of course, if you put it in a studio and you put it on a shock mount, which, by the way, is really hard. You can only buy their custom, like insanely big, weirdly mounted shock mount because it's not made for that. It's made to be in their stand. They pretend it's a shock mounted, mic, but no. Right. And then you have to find a pop filter that'll fit over it because it's not end addressed, it's side address, and it's just very weird to use in that way. You can make it happen, but it's not made for that. It's made for people who really don't have great ideas about audio, and you can, just as you say, stick it on a conference table and it'll work. And I have the Yeti Pro, which is their version that also lets you do XLR, and it's another gorgeous mic. If I ever build a studio for myself, I very well might put that mic back up. But until I do, dynamic makes so much more sense, especially for beginner podcasters.
Right. And one of my favorite times of engineering a podcast recording is when you have to tell not only the host, but the guest, don't touch the table that the mic is on. Don't even touch it. Literally, don't put your arm on it. So that's the thing. How can you not touch the table and yet be close to the mic?
Oh, absolutely. And you take a dynamic mic. You could touch the table even without a shock mount. You'll get away with it. But the condenser, like if you even breathe on the table, it's coming into your audio.
Right. It's so funny. Don't touch the table. Don't do anything. Put on a straitjacket and sit there and lean over and talk the whole time. It's crazy. Anyway, that being said, like you said, a lot of people have the Blue Yeti, and it's a good mic. But there's a lot of ways it can go wrong. So you, so what is your normal mic? I know you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, the Shure 87A. And that was a new acquisition because of these. There's a bunch of podcast mic reviews out there, and I had never heard of this mic at all. And I tried it. It sounded great. And it actually temporarily retired my Heil PR40, which was my go-to mic for quite a few years.
Wow. So you have had a lot of mics. What other mics have you had?
I had the Shure SM7.
Oh, yeah.
I had the Heil PR40 for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I've never tried. I've restrained myself from going to anything more expensive than those mics because that's a path, just paved with destruction of all free cash,
especially marriages.
Yes. So I'm staying away from all of the insanely expensive ones. These are more than enough for what I'm doing right now. So I've stopped.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I think I have like 5 of the ATR 2100s or the other variant of that same mic, which I'm blanking on.
I think it's a 2005, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And those are, they're giveaway mics. They're if I have 4 guests and I want to record mics, and those are fantastic. I was blown away by how good those sounded for the money.
Definitely, yeah. That's a podcasting standard right there, the ATR 2100. And especially, I haven't seen these yet, but people say that at times they'll go on sale for like $39 each or something. And then they just buy like 5 of them.
Yeah, and they expand with you because they start off USB, which is what I recommend every beginning podcaster use. There's no reason to delve into the world of, amps and all that. If you're just a beginner, you don't even know if you're going to do it. But then when you're ready, it could go XLR and become your guest mic.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so you normally use the Shure 87A, and then you plug into your mixer?
So I plug into the Sound Devices USB Pre, which I guess you could call a mixer, but really has no controls except mic gain. And it has some built-in, it has a built-in Hi-Pass filter, but it has really very little. There's no compressor, there's no gating. It's just the cleanest gain I've ever found and these things are expensive. I had to work my way up to convincing myself that this was a good idea. But
really?
Yeah, for a USB pre, this thing is insanely good.
What does it go for?
Like $700.
Really? Okay. Yeah, that's pretty serious.
But I was just buying, ones every now and then. I just realized that these dynamic mics, especially all the Shure products, just require very, very high
a lot of gain.
And,
yep.
Yeah, and they're just these gain-hungry mics. And it was my downfall when I first restarted the podcast because I was, I didn't follow my own advice and I didn't start with a USB mic. I think I had the Shure 58 Beta, if that. And that's a great mic, but that mic needs insane amounts of gain. And I had a crappy preamp. So I had a decent mic, crappy preamp, and when you put those two together with a gain-hungry mic, it sounds horrible.
Yeah, a lot of noise gets injected.
Oh yeah,
at every step. That's why I like these. I haven't tried any of them, but there's things now where they're like pre-preamps, like the Cloud Lifter. What is the other one? Fethead.
Crap. Yep, that's the one.
Something else. There's a few others too, and I haven't tried these yet, but it sounds like a great idea. You plug your mic into, for instance, the Cloud Lifter, and it gives it like 20 dB or 25 dB?
Yeah, 20 clean. It just uses phantom power to power that. Yeah, that's the way to go if you have a crappy preamp.
And then you go into your preamp. But I wonder how clean those are, because they're not that cheap. They're $100 or so, I think, right? Or more?
So I had the Cloud Lifter. Okay. With my Heil before I bought this preamp, and it was clean gain. You're just getting 20 of clean gain.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have a client who actually does not live in the U.S. and has a microphone that needs a lot of gain, and it would be great if he had a Cloud Lifter or a Fethead, but getting him one is another issue without it costing $400 with shipping and everything. So
yeah.
We're kind of dealing with a little bit, the level's a little low on his recordings, but it's not too low. Like, it's not to that point where it's nasty.
Yep.
And it's not even bad. It's still good. I'd say it's good. It's not great. So we can live with it. But I think he's using an iRig little mic preamp, but he has it cranked all the way up. But it's okay.
That's not going to power a dynamic mic very well.
Yeah. Yeah, he's using like a headset mic too. A decent headset mic though. It's a headset mic that does not have the earphones built in either. It's just literally the mic.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I always recommended that for guests who just have no idea, because if you could get them to put that headphone below or above the level of their lips and just leave it there, it's such a delight versus them moving back and forth in front of their mic.
But so he has to wear, it's like a headset with the mic, but then it has no, like I said, it has no speakers to go in his ears. So then he has to put above that earphones or headphones, and then the mic it's like rubbing against the headphones, making a noise. It's a weird setup. I mean, why would you make a headset mic without speakers?
Yeah, that's weird. That is weird.
It's a little weird.
I wonder. I guess you could, if you're just doing. I can't think of a reason. Though I'm going to make a very reluctant admission, and this probably knocks me out of the audio engineering circles. But I don't wear my cans when I'm actually recording. I'm not listening to myself at all. Does that a horrible travesty?
Wait a minute, you're not listening to yourself, but how are you hearing me?
Oh no. So if I'm doing a interview, then I have to. But if I'm doing those single podcasts,
when you're solo,
not monitoring at all.
That's fine. Look, and the only consideration there is, how is your mic technique? Because one of the benefits of hearing yourself is knowing when you get off the mic. You can hear yourself drift away and you're like, "Ooh, I better get back on the mic." But if your mic technique is fine and you're by yourself, then definitely you don't need to wear headphones.
See, now I've gone to the confessional and now I feel redeemed.
That's right, and it reminds me of a little story. It's story time here on the show. I've never done this. I've never done this, Scott. Would you indulge me here?
I would love it.
All right, so I'm working at Soundtrack in New York. It's probably 1994 or 90. No, it's 94. And my friend is the assistant engineer on the Jeff Buckley session, which is happening in Studio I with Andy Wallace engineering. Hello, Andy Wallace, Nirvana. I mean, a zillion albums he's done. Anyway, one of my mentors as a recording engineer, Andy Wallace. So they're doing the Jeff Buckley album, and my roommate is the assistant engineer on those sessions, and he's loving it. His name is Bryant Jackson. Maybe sometime he'll come on this show because he's still recording music and stuff. Actually, he doesn't podcast at all, so he probably wouldn't be on this show. But so he tells me once, he's like, yeah, we had this cool setup where Jeff Buckley would go in the studio. It was a small room. It was maybe, let's say, 12 by 12. It wasn't that big. And he was doing vocal overdubs because, when you record music for real, there comes a time when usually almost the last thing that's done is the singer goes in the room and does the final vocals, right? While listening to the completed track in their headphones, right? So they wear headphones and they sing into a mic, usually a really awesome mic, like really, really awesome mic, right? Because that's what you do in the studios when you have the budget. So, but Jeff went in there and he and Andy Wallace did with him was this thing where Jeff didn't want to wear headphones. So they set up the mic. Think about this. They set up the vocal mic and Jeff standing there in front of it, no headphones. Now in the studio room, right there in the room, there's 2 speakers up on the wall. So there's actually monitors in the studio room. So that's because when someone does a take, you can actually play it back from the console through those speakers in the room. So whoever's in the room can hear the take. So Jeff's standing there in front of the vocal mic, and there's speakers pointed at him, like from the other side of the mic, right? And what Andy did was had Jeff stand in front of the mic, and he played the music track through the speakers, the whole track from beginning to end. Jeff just stood there, didn't say a word, was completely quiet, right? And Andy recorded the microphone signal with that. So think about it. What was recorded was, it's just going to sound like the track bouncing around this room and going into the mic, right? That's what that's what it's going to sound like. So Andy recorded that on one track. Then he rewinds the tape. Yes, we used tape back then. And he takes that track that he just recorded and hits the phase switch, puts it out of phase. Now he runs the track again, recording Jeff's mic on a different track, and now Jeff sings. And actually, he didn't have to do the phase thing yet, but he just actually muted that first track. So now he played the music in the room, and Jeff was singing. So now on that track, you have Jeff singing into the mic, but you also have all this background noise of the track, right? Bouncing around the room into the mic. Then when Jeff was done, they go back in the room, he puts up the first track, flips the phase, and the music in the music bleed that's bleeding into the mic gets phased out. It disappears. And all you're left with is Jeff's voice.
Very cool.
That is a cool way of using no headphones, and I don't know if no one would ever do that in podcasting. But anyway, and no one probably ever uses phase in podcasting.
No, that's
anyway. Was that okay to tell that story?
Yeah, I think that story's great.
That's one. I'm going to try and tell a little more stories because they're interesting. I mean, it's really interesting, and I was very honored to be part of. Well, having my roommate be part of that. Jeff Buckley's album. It's called Grace. And I don't know if you're listening to this and you don't know Jeff Buckley, his album Grace came out in 94, I think, and he ended up drowning in 96 or 97, I think. But he was, you got to hear this guy sing. It's stupid. It's like, I mean, he was on another level. And that's that one song, Hallelujah.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Everyone's heard that one now. But he did a lot of other stuff, and it's cool because my friend would be on the sessions, and when he was in the dub room making dubs, because they would do like rough mixes and then put it on like a cassette for Jeff to take home, or a DAT, whatever. And so we'd be in the dub room, and he'd call me up. He'd be like, "Dude, get over here," and I'd go stand in the dub room with him as these songs are being recorded, and we would just sit there and be like, "Oh my God, this is awesome." Right?
It's gotta be so cool to see that at that point in the production.
And all the outtakes that never made the album, we heard everything. It was crazy. All right, so you're recording into Audition, and we actually went through Audition. What did you use before Audition?
Nothing. I never used anything except Audition. And this is one of my just key messages to new medical podcasters is you could get a free program and cheap program, what have you, and then work your way up, and that's fine. But the learning curve is no harder in the professional level DAWs. And it just made no sense to me to learn a program that I knew I was eventually going to outgrow.
Totally. Right. And the noise reduction, I like what you're doing there. You actually take a little noise sample and then feed it into the noise reduction plugin, and it takes care of it. That's really cool. I do the same thing in SoundForge as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, whichever program you get into, the muscle memory comes to the point where you're pretty much going to stay with that. It's really hard to switch. So you better just choose right at the beginning.
That's true. Well, I've been thinking, because my production computer is 3.5 years old now, which is, for those of us who've been around long enough to have many computers, that 3, 4, maybe 5 years is the max. I don't know.
Yep.
So I know I'm going to have to basically upgrade my whole main production computer, and I figured at that time I would go, because right now I'm using Reaper for multitrack and SoundForge for stereo and mastering, but everyone's talking about Audition, and then so I don't know. I was thinking about making a switch at that time, right? Why not? If I'm going to switch everything, might as well just change everything.
Sure.
We'll see how that works. All right, so EQing, you use a high-pass filter to roll off under 90 or 100 hertz, something like that. How else do you use EQ?
I rarely have to use it for my voice. It's more the case when I have a guest and either they were on the wrong mic or their voice just has a little bit of idiosyncrasy to it that I'll have to go in and actually adjust their EQ. I found the mics that work with my voice, and in general, very little adjustments needed, but definitely. In fact, I had a guest recently, and she was a delightful female voice. She had a delightful female voice in person, but just sounded very screechy on her recording. And I don't know if she had done something to the audio or just the poor mic choice, but I definitely had to do some forensic EQ there.
Okay. What'd you do?
I wanted to say I just cut at 3,000, and it just took a little bit of the screechiness out. I think that's where it wound up being.
Right.
But I don't know how you do this, but I just cut a lot. I'll cut like 15 dB and just move left and right over the frequency scale until it sounds better, and then I'll obviously moderate that cut significantly, but just to try to find the actual frequency, because you probably know each frequency's exact, ramifications on the sound. But for me, who's, just an educated amateur, I know if it sounds good or bad, so I'll just slide left and right on the screen until I'm in the right area and then just zone in on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's the perfect way to do it. Yeah, I still do that. Yeah. I mean, even when you get to know the frequencies better, you still have to do that because, telling, the difference between 2,800 hertz and 3,600 hertz is, actually that one might be easier, but, but 3,600 to 4,100, I mean, you can't do that. So you got to do what you said. You search for that frequency and then you take it out. And the band, which to me has always been the most important in any recording, either music or podcasting, is the low mids. So you can do the same thing in the low mids, because right around 400 hertz or 430 or 450 or even 380, somewhere in there is the mud. And you can find it and take it out. You can't take out too much. Well, it's like anything. You can't take out too much, but if it's a little muddy, you can take it out, and it makes it so much clearer. And that's the thing. Most microphones are relatively flat, meaning they pick up the sound flat in that area. So the microphone is capturing all those frequencies, but when it's mixed down and edited and mastered, you don't want to hear all those frequencies. So low mid is like, to me, that's like the first thing about EQ that I hear, that I take out, that I adjust, except maybe for the low end roll off, but low mid is so important. And it's so funny when you're balancing two voices against each other, you gotta hear both voices. So if one voice has a lot of low mids and the other doesn't have as much, sometimes you can bring down the one that has a lot just to even them out within that frequency band.
Oh yeah, that's great.
It's pretty cool. You can, yeah, and what the hell? I'm on a roll today. The other thing you can balance between voices is compression. Some voices, especially anything recorded through Skype, well, sometimes Skype doesn't compress too much. Sometimes Skype compresses a lot, and technically it might be a limiter in there. I don't know what they're using, but it's probably like a limiter. But whatever comes out of Skype is somehow it's usually more compressed than the other voices. So it's hard to balance two voices that have very big differences in compression.
Absolutely.
It's hard. So you almost have to compress the other voice as much as the first voice. And then once they're compressed about equally, then you can balance them. It just makes it a lot easier.
You've put your finger on exactly my workflow for when I'm doing the two-person podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So for that, I'm recording with Skype. If it's a really important interview, I'll send them a mic. But in general, they're using whatever they got. And I found that the iPhone earbuds are actually pretty good. Like if you're going to go for anything that they may have, that's probably your best bet.
Yeah.
I'll actually do the recording on my end. If they're in any way savvy, I'll ask them for a double ender, but very rarely do I actually use it. I'll just use what I already have. And it's exactly as you say. I'll wind up having to compress my voice to match theirs. I'll EQ them. I'll EQ myself separately. And then I'll actually send it out to Auphonic, which I think is one of the best things for a beginning podcaster to invest in. It's just game-changing. I mean, we used to use the levelator. It was okay, but Auphonic is just brilliant.
And you use that on individual voices or once you mix them together?
Once I've mixed them together, and it doesn't matter if I send it out as a stereo or mono with, stereo with each one just all the way left and right, or a mono with them mixed, because it seemingly Auphonic sounds the same. I've tried it both ways. So either way, you can mix down to a mono, or you could send it out as the dual tracks.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually got the Auphonic multi-track app. I downloaded it. So what you can do with there is you can feed it 2 mono tracks, and it'll actually apply the leveling to each one separately and then mix them together for you and spit out this one file for you. It's pretty cool. Same thing it's doing for you, actually. So how do you connect with folks? Are you mainly using Skype?
I am now. And, I've thought about trying some of the others, but I've had pretty good results with Skype. With the hardest part being when I'm calling someone on a phone, like that's their only option. And Skype lets you dial phone numbers, so you can still do your recording.
Right.
But that's an EQ disaster. And I don't know if you have any tips of making a phone sound like the person actually has a decent voice, but I'm looking for them.
Well, I have the I'm going to take the cover off it. The JK Audio Broadcast Host, which is this little box where you plug in the phone and it plugs into your mixer. It's not cheap. It's like $450. It works pretty good. That's how I do most of my phone calls. I've also done phone calls in Skype, and what I've noticed is, first of all, Skype kind of does the ducking thing where it sort of mutes when the person's not talking, it mutes them. So it seemingly takes out like the background noise on a phone, because obviously there's that noise in the back. The other thing Skype does to a phone call, in my experience, is compress it pretty well, which, you know what? That's okay. And, because I can handle that. That's probably good. I'd probably rather compress it myself, but okay, it's okay. But the other thing Skype does to a phone call is, I don't know if it cuts off high frequencies or how it handles high frequencies, but the track that I record when it's a phone call on Skype seems to be a little or significantly dull. Not a lot of presence, not a lot of clarity. So I end up having to boost the high end. But when I boost the high end, what I hear is very strange, almost like there's no high end there. I think it might actually drop the sampling frequency down to, I don't even know, maybe 32K instead of 44.1 or 48. Maybe it brings it down to 32 or 20. I don't know. Maybe it's 20. So you're only hearing up to 10 kilohertz.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, if they're on a landline, then that just built into that, you're losing an enormous amount of the frequency response. It's just such a tight band. You actually get on a landline. And I don't know cell phones, how wide their frequency is.
Right. That'd be an interesting little experiment to do some analysis on phones and the phone through a regular, like a broadcast host, or phone through Skype. But look, in the end, as if you're listening to this show regularly, it all comes down to your ear, what you're hearing. You can do analysis, you can do a spectrometer, you can do whatever you want, but in the end, it's what you hear. In fact, this just happened And that's something that happens with Auphonic. People will put two voices in, and Auphonic will level them both to, let's say, minus 16 LUFS or minus 18 LUFS. That's the one I usually choose for single voices, minus 18. Depending on the EQ of those different voices, they'll end up being different levels. If one voice is more bassy, has more low end, it'll end up sounding lower in volume than the other one. If one is more mid-rangey, like a phone call, that'll sound much louder. So that's why in the end, you got to use your ear. You got to listen to it as a listener and say, that's low. That's loud, and you got to make the adjustment.
Absolutely. Once it goes through Auphonic, it goes right back into the DAW, and then you stick on your headphones. I actually will stick on crappy headphones as well, listening to the monitors. I haven't gone to the point of listening into my car. I know some people talk about before they'll release, they'll do like 15 separate tests in various circumstances. I'm not producing, platinum level records, so I don't think I need to go to that crazy level, but I will listen to it after it goes through and make sure that it sounds right to my ear, just as you say, Chris.
Right? So I want to talk about your tube model compressor. Oh, actually, Barry, you've used a tube model compressor before, right? Yeah. What is someone going to need to make a tube model compressor sound good, Barry?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Really? All right. Is there anything else you're going to need? As I'm switching my soundboard here, is there anything else you're going to need?
Saws, hammers, nails. Monkeys, pumas, yeah.
Yeah. All right, enough of Barry. So on the tube model compressor, I know you said that you use a ratio of 3-to-1 usually.
Yeah.
What do you tweak every episode? What parameters are you tweaking actually?
I mean, in the compressor, all you have to tweak is if your levels were different for some reason, and the PCs, probably due to Skype, they have a tendency to let if you're using a USB mic, your sound levels drift. And even if you're not using a USB mic, you're still coming in through the PC's sound control panel. And I got to blame it on Skype. It just messes with those levels on a constant basis. And I have like a little checklist that says check sound levels in the PC control panel, because you'll get screwed. Your normal setting will be something like 85, and then you'll look at it and it's at 100, and then you can't understand why you're peaking on all of your levels, even though your mic is the same and your preamp's the same. So if something stupid happens like that, then I'll have to adjust what the threshold is on the compressor. But aside from that, my attack and release stays the same. I found the one that works for my voice. The ratio, like I say, it's almost always 3-to-1. I don't have to mess with the compressor very much, except to just find the threshold based on the audio.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you if there's anything you want to share that we haven't covered in a second. I'll let you think about it for a few minutes. But I definitely wanted to ask you. You said you're not an audio engineer, but you did take some courses years ago. Now, being years later, what aspects of that training were the most valuable to you?
Oh, wow. The biggest tip I got from all of that was don't mess with the audio that much. I mean, there are like 500 separate controls in a professional level DAW, and you're gonna go through each one of them, and you're gonna add a flanger to your voice and all this. Don't do that. Just get a clean signal, because people don't care. They just want to hear something that sounds good and doesn't detract from the message, as opposed to making the way the audio engineering sounds the message. Because that might be fine for a vocal recording of a singer, but for a informational podcast, people want all of that stuff to fade into the background and the actual facts you're relaying to be the primary stage.
That's right. The listener, the best experience for the listener is when they hear the podcast and they don't even think about sound or EQ or nothing. They literally just hear the person's message. That's the goal of audio engineering, is to be completely transparent and a non-issue. Really.
Absolutely.
Totally.
I mean, if you ask me for the lessons learned, it would be this. You can't have P-pops on your recording. That just is so jarring and irksome to listen to. So figure out how to get rid of that.
Oh, the pops.
Yep.
So how do you... Oh, sorry. I'm going to ask you. Go ahead.
Oh, and then make sure your levels are okay, and make sure there's no discordant background noise or reverb. And if you've managed to do that, I think it's a win. I will happily listen to the audio in your podcast if none of those things are present.
Right. All right, so if someone does record and has the popping Ps, and then it's on the track and you're sitting down to edit it and stuff, how do you handle it?
Oh God, you have to go in and each individually like just take them out, and it's torture. I haven't found anything that does a great job automatically, and it's just really, really. I just hate it. And
yeah,
go ahead.
Oh no, I just gonna say that recently this happened to me, and I was just gonna leave it because I mean, look, if you use a compressor with a very short attack, like literally 1 millisecond, the compressor will sort of smack down those P's to some extent. Also, most of the thing that's annoying about the P's is in the low frequencies. So sometimes you can just roll off some low frequency and it'll reduce those P's as well. But I actually was like, you know what? I'm going to get a little medieval on this. And I just literally, I think I spent literally probably 2 hours. I used the multi-band. I went nuts because I'm like, this stuff is fun for us, right? I was like, I'm going to try this. So I got my multi-band compressor and I put the lowest frequency band at like, I don't even know, 300 and below or something. And I didn't compress any of the higher frequencies, just the lower frequency, and I crushed it. I mean, I literally like, the attack was like, again, 1 millisecond or 0 if you can even get it lower. And I just messed with the compression of that low end, and it took a while to dial it in. And I think I did some EQ as well, because on the each band of the multi-band compressor, you can raise or lower the gain, which is basically like turning down the volume or up the volume of that particular band. So that's what I did. I messed with everything, and it ended up kind of working. But it was pretty much hell to do it. But anyway, that's what I did, and it ended up working. But you don't want to do that every time.
No. I'm going to try that. That sounds like an interesting way to go.
Oh, it's a lot of work. I don't know. It's a lot of work. But so, Scott, anything else that we didn't talk about? Anything else that's relevant?
I think if beginning podcasters would spend more time on learning good mic technique and less time messing with audio controls, they'd probably be net better off.
That, seriously, thank you for saying that. That is great. And anything you can do to avoid work later is worth doing. You said you actually took courses or you learned how to have better technique, right? Yes. Look, and did that cost you money?
It cost a little bit, but so inconsequential compared to the cost of the people buying, $800 microphones. They should probably invest the $80 for a couple hours of lessons with a professional audio engineer and just buy a $200 mic, and their sound would probably be infinitely better.
Totally. Well, Scott, this has been really awesome. I just wanted to remind everyone that your podcast is the EMCrit Podcast, and it's at EMCrit.org. That's EMCRIT.org. And that link will be on the show post, so just go there. Scott Weingart, this has been awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the Podcast Engineering Show.
Oh, it was so much fun, Chris.
I love this. This was such a fun session. I got to tell a story, and you had a lot of really good tips for our listeners, so this is really why I do the show and why we love this show. So thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. I know it was. And we'll be back next week with another great guest. Until then, I have more time to fill, Scott. What should I say?
Oh, I don't know.
All right. It's almost time. Until next week, you know what to do. Sound great!
Tonight, I don't wanna hear it. What the up on me where some change the game and give away. Say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. Why tell you what makes it? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so actively. I want you to know you were ever with me. So I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold that meaning. And does it mean it's still the same? You're pushing me away. You worked your theories now where you're getting worked up on you now. You work your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me now. Now that these words have slid apart now. You tell me that you found